Well, I didn't mention the Boy Scouts, but I see they had disbanded my dad's generation. I mean, and my mother belonged to Troop 30, the Girl Scouts, who was two of the Millhenge girls were the co-leaders and leaders. So we've been active my whole life in 4th Street, except for the period that we left and tried to find one. You'd be surprised when those suburbs first started building up. Churches did not have nursery departments or kindergarten departments. So my mother, he was gone, he was over in the Pacific, so my mother went to Greenfield Presbyterian. We were not happy with Royal Oak. They weren't friendly. Like we're used to friendly church. And Birmingham, the only people that ever really talked to us at Birmingham was Sylvia and Doug Witters, which is Ernie's sister. And a man we found out was a butcher. He talked to us
every Sunday.
Every Sunday.
You always stand at the foot of the balcony. Always said
hello. Very nice. But we did try, and I guess we were lucky. We never found a church we really liked outside of 4th Street. And actually, it was Hugh Lemming that came. We came and visited Boy Scout Sunday, and he called on us that week. He came to the house. This man got out of a car, and I thought, oh, that's Reverend Lemming, and he came in. In the meantime, his dad was in Veterans Hospital. He called on his dad every week, and his dad was never a member. He loved the church, but he never was a member. But he was actually Hugh Lemming that got us to come back. Yeah. And we got involved with the Couples Club, which was the Bob Lowers and the Colemans and the Sprats and the, well, I mean, we had, road races and square dances. We had a lot of square dances. If you ever see a red and white checkered tablecloth, those are from the square dances. Yeah. We had down in the Donlin room. Yeah. Before it was remodeled the way it is, you couldn't have a square dance there. But that's why I said to Randy, I could go. I keep thinking of things that we did. We had basketball games, staff against the people, with cheerleaders. Kay White and I were cheerleaders because we had the biggest mouths. I can't think of a whole lot. Maybe you can. Have you heard me talk about something?
Well, I was wondering what it was like for you. I know Dad wasn't here then, but what it was like here during the Depression. So you were active here. What was it like to be involved? I mean, this was sort of a wealthy congregation in the midst of a city that was really struggling during the Depression. What was that like for you?
Well, I remember we never had a car. My dad learned to drive when he was 68 years old, believe it or not. But we always lived off of Grand River, so there was nothing to walk the block and a half. We rented houses through the bank that were repossessed, actually, by people who couldn't afford them during the Depression. And we always, my dad always managed to rent a house in the city. I only went to 3 schools, elementary, junior high, and high school. I don't remember a whole lot. I remember Easter, my mother would go without so much, so my brother and I had new shoes for Easter. I don't even remember. I remember Wednesday nights here. Well, you do too. I used to pull in the driveway, honk the horn, she'd come flying out. I think the longest I ever drove was from my house down 75 to church. I almost killed a motorcyclist the first time I did that blind spot. I cut him off. Oh, if looks could have killed, I'd have been dead. Yep. We had great programs on Wednesday night.
Were you involved when they used to show the movies?
Yeah, Bob Garvin has a great collection of old, not Abbott, Laurel and Hardy.
Laurel and Hardy. Yeah.
And the auditorium was full, and then he was playing this, and Iola Jackson had never seen one of these movies. She laughed so hard I thought she was going to fall off her chair. I mean, and he still has those movies. Yep. We ought to have a movie night some night. He said he'd be glad to do it if somebody wanted to. But Wednesday nights we either had speakers or some kind of a program. We had a lot of people came for dinner. Well, we had a housekeeper then, which was
Yeah.
Barbara Place. We'd eat for like 50 cents and have a great program. And Don was usually out of town. But boy, I'd say I worked and I'd pull in the driveway, toot the horn, and she'd have to come flying out because I worked till 5 o'clock and dinner was at, I think, 5:30. And we came always until, I don't know, when you were a downtown walk-to church, your congregation was big, and now people are amazed. We come from Clawson. There's nothing coming from Clawson. It takes us, we could do it in 15 minutes if you could go 70 miles an hour, but you better watch it.
No, I'll keep it down to 65.
I don't know. I don't think another church could take place at 4th Street. I mean, you can get mad at it, but you don't leave. At least I don't. So it's a great church. The Sunday school is starting to build up again.
Yeah.
We had, I have a picture of you Halloween party where you and Chris were the big bad wolf and Little Red Riding Hood. We've had talent shows. Remember the talent show we had with all the Crillies playing trumpets and.
Yeah.
That was fun. Marcia, can you think of anything? Our experiences going to Evening Circle was fun. We always got lost. Marcia and I, too, one time we ended up down in the abandoned factory district. We missed the cutoff and there was no one down there. Here we are, 2 women sitting in a car trying to figure out how to get back on 75 and come home. Yeah.
That I can believe. This is the woman that gets lost backing out of her driveway. Where everybody else turns right, she turns left. No, there's camp was an experience for me because I came into camp late. I started probably 64 going up to camp because we started with family camp on the week before Labor Day and Labor Day weekend. Then it grew into, in the 70s, being on the camp property committee and chairman of the camp committee, co-chair.
I think Marcia was on the committee at that time too, weren't you?
And I co-chaired with the people who ran the program, and I was running the administration of the buildings themselves. In fact, there was a time I got accused by the Boy Scout troop that were up there in the spring doing cleanup. In fact, one of the Manus boys came up to me and he said, "Mr. Lorimer?" I says, "Yeah. Every time you come up here, you're here. Do you ever spend any time at home?"
No.
There was a time that I spent more time at 1551 Drainer Road than I did at 416 Charlevoix. There was many summers I would come home from work on Friday night and in the car and up to camp and get back home late Friday night and be back up there again Saturday morning and be back Saturday night. So there was a lot of things had to be done up there. A lot of maintenance work had to be done, and but thank the good Lord for Barb Jones,
Yeah.
who was a great camp cook, and the 2 summers I had him,
Jim.
nobody else could get along with him and make him work, but Jim Jones worked for me. Why, I don't know. But Jimmy Jones and I had an understanding with each other that as long as you were there, you worked, and I took care of you.
Because you're a good man, Dad.
Well,
I'll tell you how good he was. During the war, we were still meeting here. Young people were still meeting here, but we were going to have a blackout air raid rehearsal, I guess it was. And at 9 o'clock, all the lights were going to go off. You had to stop whatever you were doing. You better be home because we had a curfew. Well, I was on a bus coming home, my cousin and I coming home from Young People. We got stuck by West Grand Boulevard someplace, and we had to sit there for 15 minutes in the dark. The lights come on, we go, and I get to the corner, my cousin and I go to get off, and here stands a policeman and Don. And the policeman says, "Where were you during the blackout?" We were sitting on a bus. "You broke curfew." And Don says, "Oh, these are my sisters. I just come out to walk them home."
Hey, I'm adaptable, or adaptable, whichever the case may be.
So he had to walk us home, whether we wanted to be walked home or not, but that was funny.
I'm
He
sure
was
you
my
didn't
brother
mind
for a whole half hour, I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, which is, you know, nuts, because I lived just off the corner of Grand River in West Chicago, kind of east, and she lived off of Grand River in West Chicago, kind of west, so we were only about 2 blocks apart.
That
Well, actually,
was
what
funny.
started was that on the corner of Grand River in West Chicago was a strip of stores, about 6 stores long. I started with a drugstore, and ended with a C.F. Smith's,
Which is a grocery store.
which was a grocery store.
Like
When
Kroger's.
my parents and I moved to Grand River and Dundee, my mother shopped at C.F. Smith, and she shopped by the week. Well, she couldn't carry all the groceries home, so she would send me over to pick up the groceries, and I would come over to the C.F. Smith store, and invariably, I'd pick up these bags of groceries, and who do I get but some young woman, girl,
I was in high school.
to give me the bags of groceries to take home. Well, that was probably by 1940. 1941, I started working in the drugstore as a soda jerk. And on the weekend, who comes into the drugstore on Friday night and Saturday night but this young girl from C.F. Smith? So we conversed back and forth. Nothing contagious, just, you know, just very, very friendly, you know.
You had a girlfriend at the time.
Well, sort of.
Celia.
No, we won't talk about that. Anyhow. Meanwhile, back at the ranch. But I would see her on the weekend at the drugstore and during the week at Smith's, because she went to Mackenzie and I went to Northwestern. And so that's actually how we met. Then when I went to service in 43, she talked to my mother, and my mother said, "Would you write me, because I'm away at the Navy?" She says, "Well, if he writes me first." Well, I had her address, and I wrote her a letter, such as it was.
And it's still going on.
And then she wrote me back, and then I wrote her, and then she wrote me back. She said, "Well, we can write back and forth, but it cannot be serious." Okay, I can understand that. So, you know, so off I went my first tour out in the Pacific, and came back in spring of 44, and still didn't come down 4th Street. I went to Northwestern. Something was going on. I went back to school, but it was when I came back after the Philippines, for some reason or other, I felt the need, and I came down here, and that's when I started coming down here to going down to the canteen.
You have to tell why you would come though on the
Well,
weekend,
we
because
had,
the streetcar stopped on Grand River, and he could pull, I always knew he was home because he'd pull up his bedroom shade. I could see there was a bank and a parking lot and an alley, and I knew he got a weekend pass because his shade in his bedroom would be up. And then the first thing I know, he's running across, and he'd ride down to 4th Street with me on the streetcar. That's how he came on Sunday mornings. So we courted on the streetcar.
Actually, we did.
I mean, where else could you have privacy? There was no family rooms, you know. No.
At the end of Grand River streetcar line was what's called 5 Points, which is where the streetcar turned around. Remember on Woodward Avenue, it turns to State Fair? Well, at the end of Grand River line was called 5 Points, was a place where the streetcar turned off. There was a little coffee stand. You get that coffee and hot chocolate. And the streetcar would pull in there, and take about 15 minutes and come back down Grand River. Well, in order to get some privacy, we would take that and, you know, big spender that I was,
6 cents
the whole
person.
12 cents, you know, we had an evening to ourselves.
Well,
then I would take her into the drugstore and buy her a shake or something, you know.
he made the best malted milks of any soda jerk I ever knew.
The only thing I hated about working in the drugstore was making banana splits. You ever make a banana split? Don't. It is a sloppy mess.
Well,
Because
you know what?
You have to split the banana, 3 scoops of ice cream, 3 toppings, whipped cream,
And Jerry.
nuts, and a cherry on top. And the time you get through with that, you know,
Well, he was so good. We were already married and we had Carol when his old boss asked him would he come in and work on Wednesday nights, church night, because we live near Narden Park Methodist, a Christian Science church, and everybody'd go in for a Sunday after Wednesday night church services, and they need somebody who could work fast. So Mr. Hale asked Don if he would come in. And I think he made, what, $4 an hour or something like that.
At one time,
but that was nice because it helped round out the old paycheck.
when you worked the drugstore, you used the old scoop with the cutter in it. Well, when I first started in 41, I had to wear a wristband to strengthen my lift. By the time I got through with it, this muscle here, that you work with your thumb, was as high as the bone from working the scoop, because we used those 5-gallon cans of ice cream that was steel cans, used to bring up in the basement. 5-gallon, and we had the little 2.5-gallon, but bring those things up and put them in the freezer, and they kept them about 5 degrees below zero. That ice cream was hard, so that you put that scoop in, you had to work to get it out, you know. So we had to dip it in 2 scoops of ice cream and milk and sugar, and we had 3 single spindle mixers for a drugstore. That we had 12 stools, 3 booths, you know, and we were Friday night, because we had 3 shows in the neighborhood, which had
The old Riviera, which was like
Riviera
the Fisher.
and the Annex, and what was the one that crossed?
I don't know.
Anyhow, we would get changes and the shows on Saturday night, and get a gang in come in about 8:30, and another gang come in about 11 o'clock. So we'd be swamped. But,
Does anybody remember Martha Thorne?
Yes.
Boy, we had a couple clubs road rally one time.
oh yeah,
Don was out of town. He knew where we were going to end up.
Bowling alley.
At a bowling alley. But I rode with Bob Crilly. He had just come here, actually. He knew the city like nobody's business. But Virginia was home with the 3 boys, so I rode with Bob. And we ended up at this, getting all these clues along the way, and we ended up at this bowling alley. Martha Thorne had never bowled in her life. I didn't even, she might have thought the bowling ball was square, but she would stand right on the line, pick up the ball, and throw it. Do you know she had the best score of everybody that bowled that night?
yeah.
We couldn't believe it. Sam kept going. That was fun because couples club did a lot, and they're still all married.
Yep.
Well, Bob Lauer's Helen just died,
Yeah.
but Mandeville's come back periodically. They live up in the Thumb area, I think, someplace.
Now,
So,
when did you get engaged, and how long was it until you got married?
we got engaged on
January 26th.
29th. That's why we had to get married on I wanted to be
January
every-
29th, 1946.
And then we got married March 29th, and Carol was born 14 months later on May 29th. So everything in our life had been like on the 29th. But,
So you had a pretty long engagement then for that
yeah,
time
we
period.
did. In
January.
fact,
Over
his
a
mother,
year. Yeah.
well, we never said this to you, but his mother and dad had a fit when he
Yep.
told him that we were gonna get married. Well, number one, a Scotsman, you don't just up and go to the kirk and get married. He should have been 35 and had at least $3,000 or something in the bank. Well, when he was 35, we still did not have that $3,000 in the bank, and we'd been married since he was 25,
Yep.
23.
Yeah, 23.
So, I mean,
Yep.
we just got married.
Yep.
I mean, I wasn't, well, she told my mother later she was quite surprised I turned out to be a pretty good housewife.
Well, at least your father wouldn't have to walk down the aisle with a shotgun.
So,
No, I think my proudest moment here at 4th Street has probably been starting in '71 to now. It's been 34 years in the music program. Starting with the worship choir until about 1974, when we had the House of the Lord, which was written by Greg Aldrich, Isaacs 4 4th Street. We still have the manuscript copies of it. And that's when the quote-unquote the chorale got started. And in 1989, started with the worship choir. And I think that's probably that is probably some of my proudest moments at 4th
didn't we
Street.
have the worship choir before the chorale? Because
No.
Bob White came, we all
That was
sang
the
in
volunteer
it.
choir.
Volunteer choir, because we sang up
Yeah.
in the choir loft.
Actually,
I
what
wish they'd do again.
the first time the volunteer choir sang, you know those two pews behind the organ at the turn?
Yeah, on the bend.
Well, those two pews were out of there, and we stood there. There was probably 12 to 15 of us, and Ed was conducting from a folding chair, and John Hopkins at the organ, and we were singing SAB, because we didn't have any tenors, soprano and alto basses. And that was our first experience singing. In fact, Holly Prim, who was a great alto, was the kind of assistant leader. As we walked down the steps, Harold Prim was standing at the foot of the steps, and he said, "You wouldn't believe it, but you guys did it. You did great." So that was, I think that and 9 terms as elder is probably my crowning glory at 4th Street.
Besides marrying your wife, of course.
Well, you know.
I'm trying to save you here, Dad. Work with me.
My mother and
She
dad
knows
were
I'm being
married.
facetious.
In fact, I have their wedding invitation in this bag. Were married in 1921 by Reverend Mundell. I thought it was Vendor, and I found it going through a lot of stuff. I mean, I got church stuff all over in boxes, and then we were married by Rotz, Dr. Rotz, and he left in '48, and we were married in '47.
Yeah.
And he would rather do a funeral, he said, than marry anybody. And he had this nervous habit
Yeah.
of shaking his head. And it was like,